Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're joining us today in this live lecture coming to you from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University. Today's date is Nkwo Market Day in the Igbo lunar calendar. And in the Roman Catholic calendar, today's date is 8/28/2025. And remember, we are giving you both calendars for you to know that we, the Igbo people, the Biafran people, the African people, have our own calendar, and that is the lunar calendar. Also, many other cultures, many nations also use the lunar calendar. Even the Muslims, the Fulanis, you hear them observing the moon and so on and so forth. They also use it. And also, I think Nkolo Mahadum, we always advise you to use your naturally given common sense, which we call akonuche in Igbo language. And we are primarily set up to decolonize your mind by giving you the correct information to save you from mental slavery, where we have been bombarded with a lot of misinformation, miseducation, and misdirection. That is why we are primarily set up. And we package and present our lectures from the Igbo man, Biafran and African perspectives, because we have to be seeing and interpreting things from how it is affecting us, not how it is affecting other cultures. And that is why we are always begging you to join us, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. And go back to our previous lectures, and you will be happy that you did. And the title of today's lecture is The Analysis of the Interview by NBC Meet the Press, the interview they had with Sergey Lavrov. Sergey Lavrov is the Russian foreign prime minister. And they had this interview on August 24th, 2025. And why is this interview important? Because what Russia is defending, the cost of the Russian special military operation, is similar to what we, the Biafran people, are going through in Nigeria. And so many other ethnic groups are going through all over Africa, trying to be free from domination, from marginalization, from injustice. They are all similar. That is why we thought it is important. We use that interview by NBC, which they interviewed Sergey Lavrov, as basis to explain the world to you, and also to explain how it is affecting we, the Igbo people, Biafrans, and Africans. So you will also observe that in that interview, that the interviewer, the name of the NBC Meet the Press interviewer is Kristen Welker. Kristen Welker is the interviewer. You see how forceful she's forcefully pushing Lavrov. But Lavrov, being an experienced diplomat, was calm, cool and calm, and taking over her question and explaining all those things to her. And before we go into the video of that interview, I would like to let you know that Sergey Lavrov was born on a March 21st, 1950. Sergey Lavrov was born on March 21st, 1950. And he has been the Russian diplomat, a foreign minister for Russia since March 9th, 2004. So he's been in this position since 2004. So he's an experienced diplomat. He's well experienced in world affairs. So he's been 21 years on the job as a Russian diplomat. And so after giving you this brief background, let's now get into the interview and see how it goes. And the analysis will continue also from there. So let's go to the interview. Give me 1 second.
Joining me now is Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. Mr. Foreign Minister, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
To meet the Russian diplomats.
Thank you so much for joining us after a very significant week. Let's dive right into the state of these talks. Has President Putin committed to a one-on-one meeting with President Zelensky?
Well, those are the speculations which are being spread by, first of all, Mr. Zelensky himself and his European sponsors. It was not discussed in Anchorage. It was raised later as something which is kind of impromptu, appearing from the meeting in Washington between President Trump and his guests. President Putin received the call of President Trump after that meeting, and he clearly stated that we are ready to continue the negotiations, direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations, which started in Istanbul and already had 3 rounds convened there. And he said that meetings at the top level, the summit meetings, especially between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, must be very well prepared. So preparatory process must be agreed. And for this, we suggested to raise the level of delegations who were meeting and will be meeting in Istanbul to address specific issues which need to be brought to the attention of the President Putin and Zelensky. And those issues relate both to humanitarian, military, and to political matters. Last time our delegations met in Istanbul, we suggested to create 3 working groups, including on political matters. More than 1 month passed already. There is no response from the Ukrainian side. And when Mr. Zelensky says the immediate priority is my meeting with Putin, well, it's basically a game. A game he is very good to play because he wants theatrics in everything he is doing. He does not care about substance. And it is not by chance that now they try, I mean, the Ukrainians and the Europeans who attended the meeting in Washington, they try to distort what was discussed in Anchorage between President Trump and President Putin regarding, in particular, the security guarantees. I read some Bloomberg reports. Yeah. Yesterday and today, saying that the negotiations between US and Russia on security guarantees for Ukraine have been, in fact, undermined because of the demands by Moscow to include the principle of indivisible security. It's a very telling statement. Indivisible security is something which was enshrined in many documents adopted by consensus at the summits of Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, in particular, in Istanbul in 1999 and in Astana in 2010. This principle goes like no one can strengthen his security at the expense of security of others. No organization in the European space can pretend to dominate in military and political matters. And NATO has been doing exactly the opposite. So when we are accused that by flagging the principle of indivisible security, we are undermining the process of negotiations between between US, Russia, and Ukraine, this means that the people admit that they want divisible security, that they want security built for Ukraine, which is being discussed now, but built against Russia. Those discussions, which took place yesterday, before yesterday, after the Washington meeting, they clearly indicate that people see security as only security for Ukraine, and they are prepared to send intervention force, occupying force, to the Ukrainian territory to deter Russia. They don't conceal that this is the goal. And this is not the way to handle the situation. President Putin and President Trump in Anchorage discussed the security guarantees, and President Putin recalled that in April 2022 in Istanbul, during negotiations initiated by the Ukrainian side, very soon after we started our special military operation, during those negotiations in April in 2022, Ukrainian delegation presented a draft principles to reach a treaty, to reach agreement on ending the war. Those principles were initialed by both delegations. As regards the security guarantees for Ukraine, those principles proposed by Ukrainian delegation, I underline this once again.
It is important that we understand what Lavrov was trying to explain here, that after the special military operation of Russia started in 2022, just 2 weeks after, the Ukrainian government was about to sign an agreement to stop this war. But Biden, the president of USA at the time, and Boris Johnson, the prime minister of United Kingdom at the time, actually it was Boris Johnson that Biden sent to go and tell Zelensky not to sign that agreement. And that was how the agreement was aborted. They will have signed an agreement and this war will have never continued 2 weeks after it started. But it was aborted. It was stopped by the United States and UK Prime Minister. So let's continue to listen to Lavrov.
They provided for creation a group of guarantors. This group containing of permanent members of the Security Council, Russia, US, China, UK, and France. Plus, they mentioned Germany, Turkey, and any other country which would be interested to join this group of guarantors.
Mr. Foreign Minister,
guarantors would be guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, which must be neutral, which must be non-aligned with any military bloc, and which must be non-nuclear.
Mr. Foreign Minister, we are going to get to the security guarantees. We're going to have a big conversation about that. But I just want to stick to this idea of a one-on-one meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. It's not just Zelensky saying it. The White House says President Putin told President Trump he's willing to meet face-to-face with President Zelensky. And I guess the question is, how can you claim to be serious about a peace process when you can't tell me directly, is President Putin willing to meet with President Zelensky? Is that the plan?
Look, I hope that those who are interested in what is going on around Ukraine, they follow the statements of President Putin, especially when they try to see some wrongdoing on our side. President Putin repeatedly stated that he is ready to meet with President Zelensky. And actually yesterday at my press conference after my meeting with the Minister of India, I repeated this, that he is ready to meet with President Zelensky, provided this meeting is really going to decide something. To meet for Zelensky, to have another opportunity to be on stage is not what we believe is useful. We are not against him playing games and playing various shows, but it is not going to resolve the issue, because he publicly stated that he is not going to discuss any territories, thus challenging President Trump and other American colleagues who stated the territorial issue must be on the table. He clearly stated that nobody can prohibit him from joining NATO, which is again categorically challenges what President Trump was saying, and quite a number of other things. He also said that he is not going to restore the rights of the Russian-speaking people and cancel legislation which was passed long before the special military operation, starting from 2019. A series of legislation was passed in Ukrainian parliament prohibiting Russian language, exterminating Russian language, Russian culture, Russian education, Russian media, and canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So when he said that I don't give a damn about what you are saying, what President Trump believes must be a part of the solution, but I am ready to meet just to do what? So if we are all going to be concentrated on, you know,
what Lavrov is saying here is that you see how they protect their culture. Everybody in the world protests their own culture. He's saying that Zelensky is not protecting the people who have Russian language, who speak Russian, who have Russian culture, Russian language, Russian religion, living in Ukraine. That is, those Russian people living in the eastern part of Ukraine, that Zelensky, the government of Ukraine, led by Zelensky, is not protecting the people that are Russian people. Why are they Russian people? Because they have Russian culture. Just like we in Biafra land, we have Biafran culture, Igbo culture. And that is what we should be protecting, because every culture protects their own. The Igbo language have to be protected. The Igbo festivals, all the masquerades, everything we are doing, all our dance, all our songs, all our dressing, all our languages, different dialects should be protected, because every nation, every culture protects their own. That is what Lavrov is saying here, that the people in Ukraine, in the eastern part of Ukraine, who are Russian people practicing Russian culture, should be allowed to practice their culture and be what they are, than trying to make them what they are not. That's what he's trying to say, that Zelensky doesn't believe in all those things. So why should he have a meeting with Putin when he cannot, when the meeting will not yield to any results, when the meeting will not produce any results? Why should they waste their time? That's what he's saying. So let's continue to listen to him.
Imaginary effect. It's not what diplomacy is about. It's what the showmen normally do with pleasure.
So bottom line, there's no meeting planned.
President Putin said clearly that he is ready to meet, provided this meeting is really going to have an agenda, presidential agenda.
So that's a big if. There's no meeting planned, Mr. Foreign Minister. That's a big if. You're saying there's no meeting planned right now.
Kristen, I'm awfully sorry, you're not listening. There is no meeting planned, and I'm not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all. President Trump suggested after Anchorage several points which we share. And on some of them, we agreed to show some flexibility.
Okay.
When President Trump brought those issues to the meeting in Washington, with Zelensky present together with his European sponsors.
Lavrov is trying to educate this NBC anchor about what is called presidential agenda, that before they can have a meeting with Zelensky, there must be an agenda for the meeting. The meeting must have what he called presidential agenda. There must be a presidential agenda before two heads of governments can meet. That is what Lavrov is trying to make this reporter to understand. You can't just have a meeting like that. It's not that you can't just have a presidential meeting, a meeting involving two leaders just like that without an agenda, what to discuss and the outcome, what will be the expected outcome of that meeting. So that's what he's trying to let the reporter know, because the reporter thought that when two leaders want to meet, you just meet, say, hey, we're gonna meet tomorrow, and you just meet tomorrow like that. No, there must be an agenda. What are we going to discuss? Just like when Trump and Putin met, they already have a presidential agenda, what they have to discuss. That was why that meeting was very, very successful. So that is what Lavrov is trying to lecture this NBC anchor on. That is how, before you have a meeting with two leaders of a country, you must have an agenda. That's what he's trying to let her know. Let's continue to listen to Lavrov.
He clearly indicated, it was very clear to everybody that there are several principles which Washington believes must be accepted, including no NATO membership, including the discussion of territorial issues. And Zelensky said no to everything. He even said no to, as I said, to canceling legislation prohibiting the Russian language. How can we meet with a person who is pretending to be a leader, the leader of a country, which is the only country on earth who had prohibited a language, not to mention that this is one of the official UN languages. In Israel, Arabic language is not prohibited. In Palestine,
let me explain something here about prohibiting languages. It's just like in Igbo land or in Biafra land or in Africa, where we prevent even our own people from speaking our language in the schools. You don't do that. When we are doing that, we are bringing down our culture. We are trying to exterminate our culture. So when you hear that the Igbo language will no longer be available after some time, it is because of these policies that our people are enforcing on our people. How can you flog a child? How can you discipline a student for speaking our own language in our own land, in the school in our own land? How does it make sense? That is what Lavrov was saying, that even Zelensky was prohibiting the Russian people speaking Russian language in that eastern part of Ukraine. And that is wrong. We should make sure that Igbo language is mandatory in all the educational levels in our land. That is how to make sure that that language is popular, that is endemic, that it can never die, than trying to suppress and discipline people who speak our language in our land. It is wrong. Ukraine government is doing it to their own people, the Russian people. And the Russians living in Ukraine are saying no to that. That was why one of the causes of that special military operation by Russia in Ukraine. So let's continue to listen to Lavrov. This is very, 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 very important and interesting.
In other Arab countries, Hebrew is not prohibited, but Ukraine does whatever they believe is necessary to promote the Russophobic nacist agenda. and the West, who is normally crazy about human rights when they discuss anything anywhere. But in relation to Ukraine, the words human rights were never used during those years after the coup in 2014.
Okay, Mr. Foreign Minister,
yes,
let's keep moving. Let's keep moving.
He is ready to meet. But no, we cannot meet just for him to have a picture and to say that now I am legitimate.
Okay.
Legitimacy is another matter, because irrespective of when this meeting might take place, and it must be very well prepared, the issue of who is going to sign the deal on the Ukrainian side.
So you're saying you don't see President Zelensky as the legitimate leader of Ukraine? President Putin doesn't recognize him as the legitimate leader of Ukraine?
No, we recognize him as de facto head of the regime. And in this capacity, we are ready to meet with him.
Okay.
But when it comes to signing legal documents, now you want to have the entire picture, just part of it, which suits you. When we come to a stage when you have to sign documents, we would need a very clear understanding by everybody that the person who is signing is legitimate. And according to the Ukrainian constitution, Mr. Zelensky is not at the moment.
Okay, well, he is the democratically elected president. Mr. Foreign Minister, let's keep moving. President Trump told French President Macron this week, quote, "I think Putin wants to make a deal for me." Is that accurate? Does President Putin want to make a deal for President Trump?
Before we delve into this question, next question, let us address this legitimacy issue of Zelensky. You know that according to the constitution of Ukraine, Zelensky have overstayed his tenure. There's no election. His tenure has already passed. That is why Lavrov is saying that he's not a legitimate president of Ukraine. And also that when they will sign the papers, the agreements, they want somebody that is reasonable, because now Zelensky wasn't re-elected by the people. He was not re-elected, so he doesn't have the support of the people. Now, transpose it to some of the elections that we are having in Nigeria or in Africa or in Igbo land or Biafra. Some of the leaders that usually emerge, it's not by the people. It's not the people. It's not leaders that the people voted for. So they do not have the mandate of the people. So when leaders don't have the mandate of the people, just like Zelensky or some puppets as the European colonial masters do impose on our people. When they impose those puppets on our people, those puppets are now answerable to them and not to the people. And even now, Lavrov is saying that Zelensky is not the one to sign the paper, but the puppets and the people they impose on our people, be it governors, be it ministers, be it presidents, be it House of National Assembly members and State House of Assembly members, these people are the ones signing the papers for us, for the people, even though they do not have the mandate of the people before they get to power. So this is what we want to explain to you, so that you have to be seeing things from the Igbo man, from the Biafran, from the African perspective, how things going on is also affecting us back home. So let's continue to listen to the interview. It's very, very, very nice interview.
Well, I would not go in this semantic, exercise. President Putin was invited by President Trump. He visited Alaska. They had a very substantive meeting in Anchorage. They discussed the practical way, not just who is going to meet whom and what kind of broadcasting would be provided. They discussed real things regarding security, the violation of Russian security interests was one of the root causes of what has happened. And this relates to many years of lies when we were promised, starting from 1990, and then many times we were promised that NATO would not be expanding. And the OSCE summit documents, which I quoted, said in the past, and nobody canceled this, that no organization must claim superiority in Europe, and NATO has been doing exactly the opposite. So the security guarantees which Russia presented several times. In 2008, we suggested to sign a pact between Russia and NATO, and it was ignored. In 2021, before we had to take a decision on launching the special military operation, we suggested two treaties, one between Russia and the United States and one between Russia and NATO. This was also ignored in a very, I would say, arrogant way. Blinken, who was Secretary of State at that time, told me when we met in Geneva in January 2022, he said, forget about this, we can discuss some limits on the weapons which we, the West, would supply to Ukraine. But NATO membership is not for discussion with anybody.
All right.
When I told him that this...
what Lavrov is saying here is he's trying to give the world the historical perspective of all the disappointments that the Russian Federation have been having from the NATO. And you know, NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization led by America and other Europeans and others. All the disappointment that they've had, because in the 1990, one of the United States Secretary of State told Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO will never expand to the eastern side of Russia. We never come too close to Russia. That's what they promised Russia. But that was not the case. They violated it. So American leaders, from Bill Clinton to George Bush to Barack Obama to Biden, all of them were expanding NATO eastwards. And upon all the complaints of Russia, they ignored them. They just ignored them and keep doing what they're doing. So that was what Lavrov was explaining to this reporter and to the world. So let's continue to listen to Lavrov.
This bluntly violates the principle of indivisible security. He said the indivisible security in OSCE is political declaration.
Yeah.
But political declaration signed by the leaders, I think it's something which just out of decency, out of diplomatic and political decency, you have to respect.
Okay, and Mr. Foreign Minister, we have a lot to get to, so I do want to keep moving. Just this week, Russia bombed an American-owned factory near the Hungarian border. I've spoken to people who frankly see that as a slap in the face to President Trump, to the entire peace process, isn't it?
Well, I would say that those who are sincerely interested in understanding what is going on should know by now that never ever Russia deliberately targeted any sites which are not linked to military abilities of Ukraine.
This is an electronics factory, though, sir. This is an electronics factory. I've spoken to people on the ground there. It builds coffee machines, among other electronics. This is not a military site.
Well, I understand that some people are really naive, and when they see a coffee machine in the window, they believe that this is the place where coffee machines are produced. Our intelligence has very good information. And we target only, as I said, either military enterprises, military sites, or industrial enterprises directly involved in producing military equipment for Ukrainian army. And on the contrary, I never recall any concern expressed by the media in the West regarding the activities of Ukrainian armed forces when they, for example, in the Kursk region, when they invaded it one year ago, there is no military targets at all. All the targets which they have been hitting daily are civilian. They, by the way, took civilian hostages from there who had nothing to do with the conflict. Recently, they undertook the third attempt to blow up the Crimean bridge. They attacked a few days ago another nuclear power station. They used to attack the one in Zaporizhia. Now they attacked the nuclear power station in Smolensk. And they continue to do this. They continue to exercise terrorist attacks. There is no other way to call them.
So Mr.
You see, what this NBC Meet the Press reporter was trying to do was to see if she will make Donald Trump to feel bad when there was a report that Russia bombed a facility, a U.S. company in Ukraine. She said, isn't that a slap on Trump's face and in the peace process? And Lavrov was trying to tell her that you can mask something. You can say you are doing Mr. A here, but you are doing something else. That they have military intelligence that confirmed that that place that was bombed, that they were using it to produce military equipment for Ukraine. That's what he was telling her. And then he was letting her know that why is it that their media, the media in the West, is not seeing all the civilian atrocities, all the civilian bombings that Ukraine have been carrying out across, the area. They're not reporting those ones, but this is the one they are quick to report. So let's continue to listen. And you know that all these major media houses are globalists. They are all in the globalist agenda. They are all in support of the war. They are all in support of fighting Russia. They are even against Trump making these peace moves. And so that is why we are encouraging our people. Be selective on where you get your information. Always get your information from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University and so many other independent outlets. Don't be wasting your time on all these major media houses because they are not there for you. So let's continue with the interview. Very, very interesting.
Foreign Minister.
But if you believe that if there is American capital in an enterprise which is used to produce weapons to kill Russians, and you believe that, be it American, be it Hungarian, be it anybody's capital, that this gives impunity to those who build weapons to kill us? I don't think so. I don't think this is fair. This is kind of, I would say, imperialistic.
Mr. Foreign Minister, just to confirm, you are confirming that Russia did in fact target and attack the American-owned company that was hit this week.
Look, you should be professor in the Soviet universities, because you twisted very interestingly what I said. I did not say that I confirmed that incident. I never heard of it. I just asked a rhetorical question. Do you believe that if there is an enterprise producing weapons and being part of the Ukrainian military machine, intended to produce things to kill Russian citizens, and just because this enterprise happened to have some American capital in it, it should be immune? That was my question. I have not heard about the episode, and if you can send me some reference to this incident to which you referred, I would look at it.
Okay, Mr. Foreign Minister, President Trump says he thinks President Putin wants to end the war. But if you are serious about peace, why not stop dropping bombs? Why not agree to the ceasefire that President Trump has?
You see, what I want you guys to observe is how this American reporter, how she is forcefully, he's pushing Lavrov with questions. Even after Lavrov have given the answer, she pretends as if she didn't hear the answer. She keeps pushing the questions and pushing the questions. Now, how many African, Nigerian, Biafran, or Igbo man journalists pushes questions like this to the politicians or to their representatives? How many of them? Most of the journalists we have in Igbo land, in Biafra land, and in Africa, they are all paperback or green envelope, air-conditioned journalists. They never ask tough questions. It is good that we see how this lady is asking and continue to ask. Even though the answers have been given, she continues to be inquisitive and asking and repeatedly. How many of our journalists are doing so? Let's continue to watch the interview. Very, very important.
Has asked you for.
There was some interruption, but we are dropping bombs. We come again and again to the same issue. We are dropping bombs on the targets which are directly involved in building Ukrainian military machine, targeting the Russian civilians, and continuing the war which Ukrainians started by instigation from Biden administration, from the Europeans, those who supported the coup in 2014, and later was doing everything to turn Ukraine in an instrument to contain Russia. And lately, a few years ago, it was announced that Ukraine is an instrument to inflict strategic defeat on the Russian Federation.
But
when I give the examples of what we are doing, and this has been explained repeatedly, if you can provide us a proof that we hit any civilian target without, indiscriminately, a target not linked to the military machine of Ukraine, we would be looking at this.
Mr. Foreign Minister?
The facts of Ukrainian, I think I should interview you. The facts of Ukrainians hitting purposefully civilian targets are plentiful, and they are available in the information which we are circulating.
Okay, well, Mr. Foreign Minister, Mr. Foreign Minister, here are the facts. Close to 50,000 civilians have either been killed or injured in this war. Russia has hit maternity wards, churches, schools, hospitals, a kindergarten just this past week. So either the Russian military has terrible aim or you are targeting civilians. Which is it?
Look, NBC is a very respectful structure, and I hope you are responsible for the words which you broadcast. I asked you to send us or to publicize the information to which you just referred, because we never targeted the civilian targets of the kind.
The NBC reporter is saying that the Russian people were targeting civilians, bombing the churches, bombing civilians, and everywhere. Remember, in the Biafran war, the churches were bombed, refugee centers were bombed, everywhere, marketplaces were bombed, and the Nigerian army got away with that. Even in what is going on in Gaza right now, hospitals are being bombed by Israel. Everywhere, civilian places were being bombed. Journalists were being killed. A lot of them have died in Gaza. A lot of civilians, a lot of doctors, a lot of people, civilians, children, a lot of starvation going on in Gaza. The same with during the Biafran-Nigerian war. The same thing. So if it is bad, why should America, why should those who call themselves civilized world be there when it happened in Biafra land and even continue to happen in Biafra land up as we speak? Because a lot of killings is going on everywhere and the world is quiet. And the world is also quiet when civilians are being killed in Gaza. But the American reporter is accusing Russia of doing the same in Ukraine. And then Lavrov was trying to also tell the reporter that Ukraine have also been targeting and bombing many civilians in Russia. So let's continue to watch the interview. It's very, very interesting.
You cited, you might be mixing, the information, because it is a fact that quite a number of churches were purposefully hit by the Ukrainian regime. Quite a number of just civilian settlements.
But what about your actions? What about your actions, Mr. Foreign Minister?
Look, we're going by circles. I told you already what we mentioned repeatedly, that we never target civilian sites, that we only attack the sites which are directly involved in the Ukrainian military machine, which the West is trying to beef up. And if you have any proof of what you just said about churches, kindergartens, schools, and so on and so forth, I challenge you.
Sure.
Make it public. Make it public with the dates, with the addresses, and so on and so forth. As I said, it's NBC is a very reputed broadcasting agency.
Absolutely. It's all publicly, Mr. Foreign Minister, it's all publicly documented, and we have reporters on the ground who've seen it with their own eyes.
Information when you make such claims.
All of the information is publicly available. We do have reporters on the ground who've seen these strikes with their own eyes. I do want to keep moving, though, and talk about security guarantees, an issue that you raised this week. And you have said right here today that Russia should have the power to reject any security guarantees for Ukraine. The Europeans say it's none of your business. What? Let me just ask the question. Why? Let me just ask the question, though.
Please. Don't play Zelensky. Look, be an honest journalist.
Mr. Foreign Minister, let me ask my question, then you can answer. Let me just ask my question, then you can answer.
I am answering you.
Well, I haven't asked my question yet.
Now.
Why should the country that's bombing Ukraine be responsible for the security of Ukraine?
Why is the country and countries who prepared the anti-Russian coup in Ukraine, who pumped up modern weapons in Ukraine to attack the Russian territory, countries who supported the Nazist regime prohibiting human rights, which they had to respect under the United Nations Charter and many other conventions. Why should we be swallowing all this? I explained to you, I never said that Russia must have a veto on security guarantees, but security guarantees must be subject to consensus. I reminded you that it was okay for Ukrainians in April 2022 to present a document which could have ended this war, and which started by declaring that Ukraine is going to be neutral, non-bloc, non-nuclear. By the way, this statement, this declaration, not to have any nuclear weapons, not to be members of military blocs, and to remain the neutral status, this was the essence of Ukrainian Declaration of Independence in 1990.
But Mr.
And
Lavrov,
this declaration of it is because of this claim that they would never be NATO members, that they would never have nuclear weapons, and that they would be neutral, that they were recognized as independent state.
but
So
Mr.
if
Foreign
you-
Minister,
if
are you
believe that-
talking?
If you believe that Russia being, marginalized,
It is important that I explain what they're talking about here, the security guarantee for Ukraine. What Lavrov is saying that even before Ukraine became independent, part of what they signed is to be neutral, to be non-nuclear, not to belong to any military bloc or armed bloc. That's what they signed. That was the foundation for their independence. So why are we going to change it now? And they also put that, the Ukrainians themselves put down in that agreement that they will have signed in 2022 to end that war, that they will be neutral, that they will not be involved in anything, arms production or military group or something like that. So that's what Lavrov is trying to explain to the world about the true nature of what is going on in Ukraine. It was Ukraine that actually started this mess by allowing America and NATO members to influence them, to have that coup, which occurred in 2014, that removed the neutral president of Ukraine. I think it's Yanukovych. So let's continue to listen to this interview because it's very, very, very nice interview.
in the discussions on security issues on our borders, that this is something which is natural and normal, then I'm sorry, something is wrong with the philosophy of your channel.
Just yes or no, are you talking about Russian boots on the ground
Where?
in Ukraine, in that region?
No, Russian boots on the ground are because this ground was moved, was being turned in a stronghold to inflict strategic defeat upon the Russian Federation. The Russian boots on the ground are not to protect the ground. They are make sure that this ground would never be hosting weapons capable to reach the Russian territory. Russian boots on the ground are because this ground is the territory where hundreds and hundreds of years ethnic Russians and Russian-speaking people were living. They actually founded those lands. They historically developed Russian culture, Russian language, and they respected Russian history.
Okay.
And when all this was prohibited after the coup took place, the coup which was a very bloody and very unconstitutional, we did not have any other choice but to defend these people against the...
This ground that Lavrov is referring to is the ground that Russian people that practice Russian culture, Russian language, Russian religion, have been living for centuries, just like the land of Biafra land, just like the Igbo land, just like African continent. This is the land that we have been living for years before the arrival of the Europeans, who came from slavery to colonization and now to neocolonialism, to put us together. In the case of the Biafran people, we have been living our life in our own land before the Europeans came and then to force us together with other people and put us into one entity called Nigeria. And that made us to lose whom we are. But that's what Lavrov is saying, that the boots on the ground, the Russian boot on the ground, is to protect those people who has been speaking, who has been Russian people, following Russian culture and following everything about Russian people. They have been there historically, just like the Igbo race, the Biafran and African people have been on our land before the arrival of the Arabs and the Europeans, and continue to mess us up to this day. So let's continue to listen to the interview. It's very, very, very nice.
Bluntly Nazist regime. And the proof that the regime is Nazist is plentiful. And I hope that some days your correspondents could visit and see what is going on with glorification of military criminals, collaborators of Hitler, and so on.
President Trump has been in office now for 7 months, and attacks against Ukraine have doubled in that time. If President Putin says the war wouldn't have started under President Trump, if that's the case, why is it escalating under President Trump?
Look, it's becoming traditional for some of the broadcasting channels to simplify things. When President Trump said that the war wouldn't have happened had he been president at that time, that means, in my view, that the Americans would not prepare, finance, and organize the coup to topple legitimate president of Ukraine in February 2014. Just one day after a deal was reached between the president at that time and the opposition, the deal guaranteed by the European Union, Germany, France, Poland, and so on. And next morning, the opposition broke the deal. The deal was to create a government of national unity and hold early elections. And legitimate president agreed to this. The opposition signed this, European Union guaranteed this. Next morning, there is a coup. And instead of government of national unity, the opposition announced.
This is where Lavrov is hitting now, was where this problem in Ukraine actually started. That the opposition and the government, they had a deal, they had an agreement, and the government in place at that time is the government of Yanukovych, a neutral government. They reached a deal, but the opposition being financed, being pressured, being supported, being organized by NATO, by America and NATO allies, they did not obey the deal. Just like Nigeria disobeyed the Aburi Accord between Nigeria and Biafra in Ghana. The same way, they had a deal with the opposition. The government in Ukraine had a deal with the opposition. But the opposition, they are the one that reneged. They are the one that moved away. They are the one that did not follow the agreement, just like Gowon did not follow the agreement reached in Aburi. That is the problem. And that is the problem we've been having in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa up to today. Let's continue to listen to the interview, because this is very, very nice interview. And hence this lecture.
That we created the government of the winners. Have you heard about this? I don't think so. They immediately stated when they took over all government buildings that their first action would be canceling the status of the Russian language.
Mr. Foreign Minister, let's talk about right now.
Military groups to storm Crimean parliament. That's how this all started.
Let's talk about what's happening now.
President Trump, with his concentration on MAGA, on the national interests of the United States, on the common sense, would ever get involved in preparing a coup against legitimate president in any country,
Okay, again,
including Ukraine. No. I am answering your question. Why did we think that President Trump would have avoided this situation? I answered you.
but I want to ask about what is happening on the ground right now. Attacks against Ukraine have doubled in the time since President Trump took office. If President Putin has so much regard, if President Putin has so much regard for President Trump, why is he taking actions that are undermining his push for peace?
President Putin has regard for President Trump, respecting President Trump concentration on the interests, national interests of the United States, national interests and well-being, and historic heritage of the American people. And I don't have any doubt that President Trump respects the same attitude of President Putin to protecting national interests of Russia, to protecting basic interests of the Russian citizens, including the right to be a nation which has very rich history, very rich traditions, and which has the duty, if you wish, to support those who share the values of the Russian language, Russian world, if you wish. And when you know, once the United States launched a military attack, it was last century, a military attack against, I think, Guatemala or some other Central American countries, because one of the journalists was physically attacked, American citizen, American journalist. And this was never causing any questions in the American media. We are protecting millions of ethnic Russian and Russian-speaking people who wanted to be citizens of Ukraine, but the coup leaders who took power in Ukraine declared them terrorists. And Zelensky, long before the special military operation, in an interview to one Western media, he said, those who are fighting the regime, who decided that the regime does not represent the interest after the coup, they are not people, they are species. And he also said that if you believe that living in Ukraine, you belong to Russian culture, Russian history, then for the sake and safety of your children and grandchildren, get out of Ukraine and go to Russia.
Mr. Foreign Minister, let me...
Is it the kind of democracy the Americans
You see, what Lavrov is trying to tell the world is that all these Russian people with Russian culture living in Ukraine, that President Zelensky at the time didn't even recognize their existence. That he was telling them, if they don't want to live over there, that they should move to Russia. You know? Can you imagine that? And so it is important that every culture protests itself. What is your culture? Your culture is your language, the food you eat, the clothes you wear, how you dance, how you write, how you see things, the religion that you worship, your spiritual satisfaction. Those are your culture. And they should be respected and not trying to be damaged or wiped out as is being done by Zelensky, that necessitated this special military operation by Russia. And in the case of Igbo land and Biafra, we should have our own nation. Because if we don't, we do not have identity. Everything we are doing under a geographical area created by United Kingdom and not us. With so many ethnic groups different languages in there. And so it is very important. That is why this special military operation by Russia was implemented to save the culture of the Russian people living in Ukraine. Let's continue to watch. Very, very good. Thank you for joining us in this live lecture.
Support.
Mr. Foreign Minister, let me ask you about something that President Putin said in June. He said, quote, "I consider the Russian and Ukrainian people to be one nation. In this sense, all of Ukraine is ours." Does President Putin believe that Ukraine has a right to exist?
No, this is not true. Ukraine has the right to exist, provided it must let people go. The people whom they call terrorists, whom they call specious, and who during a referenda, several referenda in Novorossiya, in Donbass, in Crimea, decided that they belong to the Russian culture, and the government which came to power as a result of the coup was determined as a priority to exterminate everything.
But as you also know, a number of those people did not want Russia. A number of those people did not want Russia to invade. Mr. Foreign Minister, do you acknowledge that Russia invaded Ukraine?
Well, democracy is about the people, you know, having a chance to vote. The people voted. The people pronounced themselves. And
did Russia invade Ukraine, Mr. Foreign Minister? Did Russia invade Ukraine?
Before we continue with this Russia invading Ukraine, see, Lavrov is trying to say that democracy is about what the people want. If the people want to have a referendum, you should give them a referendum. And the people of the Donbass region, the eastern part of this Ukraine, they have had their referendum and decided that they want to be independent because they have one culture. So what is wrong with that? The same thing with the Igbo race and the Biafran people and other cultures in Africa. If one homogeneous culture decides to be on their own with referendum, why not give them that referendum? Just like the Donbass region was given referendum and other places too. Even the Southern Cameroon was at some point given referendum. So why not extend the same referendum to the Biafran people and to others to decide whether they want to remain in Nigeria or not? So that's what Lavrov is saying, that their people have had a referendum and decided that they want to be on their own because they have one culture, one Russian culture, one homogeneous culture. That is what is important. What is good for the goose should also be good for the gander. So let's continue to watch the interview.
Right.
Russia started special military operation to defend the people whom Zelensky and his predecessor did not consider as humans. They called them beings, species. You should look. You should really. I understand that you need something to sell today, but if you are raising and touching upon so serious things, my suggestion is to take a look at the history of Ukrainian development after the coup in 2014.
But it's a yes or no question. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Foreign Minister. Do you acknowledge Russia invaded Ukraine?
I said to you that we started special military operation to protect the people whom the regime declared terrorists and enemies and whom the regime was bombing. Look, one thing about the facts. You were asking me about churches and so on, allegedly bombed by Russia. One very blunt thing, the simplest on earth. And I would ask as a journalist whether you are professionally proud of what you are doing. In April 2022, when a deal was negotiated in Istanbul, but the Brits and the Biden administration prohibited Ukrainian regime to endorse this deal, there was an incident in Bucha, the outskirts of Kiev, when, as a gesture of goodwill to make the deal I mentioned happen, Russians withdrew from that part of the Ukrainian territory. This place called Bucha was retaken by Ukrainian authorities, and the mayor of Bucha was on TV saying how good that we are back in our city. And 2 days later, BBC broadcasting team showed the images of central street of that Bucha with bodies, dozens of bodies laying in some interesting order. They immediately accused Russia. They immediately, I mean the West, introduced new package of sanctions. And we still, 3.5 years thereafter, we cannot get any response to our official request to circulate, to share some information about what actually happened there. Publicly, wait a second, I'm coming to NBC. I'm coming to NBC. Several times when I was in New York for the General Assembly sessions, I was meeting with the media, including NBC correspondents, and I said, this Bucha incident was used to raise stakes against Russia in this situation. Can you, and we requested the Secretary General of the United Nations, of OSCE, other organizations, can you make sure that the names of the persons whose bodies were shown by BBC are made public? Silence. Then I asked the last year and year before last, I asked at my press conference, the UN correspondents, guys, normally journalists are very intrusive. They would like to know facts. Can you start a journalistic investigation? Can you demand that the names of the people whose bodies were shown were broadcast by BBC?
It is important we say something here because Lavrov was saying that there was a city that they withdrew from in 2022. And 2 days later, bodies were shown by BBC. And from that time up till now, they've been trying to find out where BBC got that footage that they showed that were people that were killed in that city that Russia withdrew from. And what we want to say here is many of the media outlets, the ones you call mainstream media, like BBC, CNN, and all those big names, especially BBC, doesn't represent the truth. They always find a way to, to maneuver things, to present false information, just to help the British government to be achieving all their clandestine plans and activities around the world for their own benefits. That is a clear case of what is going on here. Because Lavrov, since all this interview, have been trying to let this host, Kristen Welker, to know that if NBC should be a trustworthy organization, that she shouldn't be asking some of the things she's asking. And now, he mentioned BBC, just for you to know that most of the things you are listening from most of these major media houses are just junk and nothing. Let's continue with the interview.
Be made public. So I think it would be an interesting case for NBC as well.
All right, Mr. Foreign Minister, I understand there is a lot of history. We want to talk about what's going to happen next, though, and I want to talk about these discussions. There are reports as a part of the peace deal, Russia is demanding control of all of Donbass, even though much of it still remains under Ukrainian control. And Russia wants to freeze the rest of the front lines. Is that what Russia is asking for?
We explained during our meetings with President Trump, with other American officials, we explained the goals of the special military operation. Actually, we explained them to everybody publicly, but apparently NBC was not listening attentively. We have the goals which will be achieved. The goals are remove any security threats to Russia coming from the Ukrainian territory, to protect the rights of the ethnic Russian and Russian-speaking people who believe they belong to the Russian culture and Russian history. And the only way to protect them against this Nazist regime is to give them the right to express their will. They did in 2014 in Crimea, in 2022 in Donetsk and Lugansk republics, and later in Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. So this is implementation of the goal of special military operation. The goal is based on respect for the United Nations Charter, which says you cannot discriminate human rights in any area, including language and religion rights.
Mr. Foreign Minister,
which is totally ignored by the regime.
I just want to be very clear for people.
As I said, Ukraine must remain neutral, must remain out of any military blocs, and must remain non-nuclear. Those are the stepping stones in the Declaration of Independence of 1990, and those are the principles which made it possible to recognize Ukraine as an independent state. You said, let's not go into history. We don't want to forget about history, because everything which is going now has reasons in the decades and decades of years when the West was building NATO, was moving NATO directly on Russian borders, and was building Ukraine as an instrument to defeat Russia in the battlefield, as it were.
Okay, well, speaking of history, Russia was a part of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which...
Lavrov is trying to let us know that you cannot forget your history. You cannot forget your history. We have mentioned here again, as Lavrov has stated, that Ukraine was formed out of the foundation or the agreement that the country will be neutral, will not belong to any military bloc, will not have nuclear weapon. That was the foundation of why Ukraine was recognized as an independent nation. And then, plus, you have to understand the historical culture of a people, that the people in the Donbas region are Russian people, because they are practicing Russian culture. And if you doubt it, give the people referendum. People have right to referendum. And the people have already voted in referendum saying that they want to be independent on their own. So what is wrong with that? So you must not forget your history. As an Igbo man, as a Biafran, and as an African, don't forget your history, particularly as an Igbo man. Know that we have been enslaved, know that we have been colonized, know that we have been amalgamated, know that we have been defeated in war, know that we have been marginalized and discriminated against for many, many, many years now. And yet, everybody is moving out if everything is normal. No, things are not normal with the Igbo race. We have to know your history. That's what Lavrov is saying. Let's continue to watch the interview.
Guaranteed Ukraine security, but Russia violated that agreement when it invaded Ukraine in 2014. Why should Russia be trusted with Ukraine's security and a peace agreement?
Have you read the Budapest Memorandum?
Yes.
What does it say?
There's a security agreement between a number of countries, including you and Ukraine, not to invade another country, and that's exactly what you did.
No, you don't. It seems you did not read it. The Budapest Memorandum was signed by...
And Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, Mr. Foreign Minister. That was a critical...
You see how some of these journalists work? Lavrov asked her Have she read the Budapest Agreement? And she said yes. And then Lavrov wanted her to hear what it's all about. But what she said was not what the Budapest Agreement is. You see how she disgraced herself. Instead of her to say no, she said yes. You know, that's how some of these journalists in Western cultures, in Western countries, that's how they behave. They just can talk to you anyhow, whether they are talking the truth or not. They'll be talking it with boldness. See how she's talking as if she have all the answer to the questions, where she does not. That is another thing I want you to pick out from this lecture. How she's forcefully talking and asking questions as if without even listening to the answers that are being given to her. Let's continue to watch the interview.
May I answer you? May I answer you?
Yes.
Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapons, exactly. And then it was the memorandum guaranteed the security of Ukraine as of any other non-nuclear state. And the legal obligations of the nuclear states, when they give guarantees to non-nuclear countries, is not to attack, to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states. We never, ever signed up to providing security to Ukraine after illegal, bloody coup d'etat, which brought to power open nazists and racists under anti-Russian slogans. When they said that we changed our constitution, now the constitution says they would be members of NATO. Now Zelensky in, I think, January 22 was saying that it was a mistake to reject nuclear weapons and they might think about having them again. This is not something which we guaranteed in the Budapest Memorandum.
All right, just to be...
And apart from this, wait a second, please. Budapest Memorandum was accompanied by a declaration by those who signed the Budapest Memorandum, which said that all participants, including Ukraine, would respect human rights, would respect the rules of OSCE, principles of OSCE, non-aggression, and so on and so forth, which was grossly violated by those who took power in Ukraine in February 2024, 2014, with the help of the United States, when Victoria Nuland proudly stated that eventually we spent $5 billion, but we achieved what we wanted. She said this after the coup.
Okay, Mr. Foreign Minister.
But this is history, but this is history.
I just want to be very clear. Is the only concession...
It is very important that I do explain certain things here. That if the West, that is America and NATO, knew about the agreements that made Ukraine an independent country, that declared it to be a non-nuclear country, that will not belong to any military bloc. And if the West is aware of the Budapest Agreement as being stated by Lavrov, why then and then are they using Ukraine as a stepping ground to weaken or strategically defeat Russia? Why are they doing that? And you see how Lavrov systematically is educating the world about all the agreements they have signed which have something to do with Ukraine. And yet, the interviewer, Kristen Welker of the Meet the Press of NBC, she doesn't have those information. If you don't have such information, you shouldn't be the one interviewing somebody like Lavrov, who is a well-experienced diplomat. Let's continue to watch the interview. It's very, very important.
Russia is offering not to invade the rest of Ukraine. Is that your concession?
No, we don't speak in those terms. We don't have any interest in territories. We have the biggest territory on earth. What we are concerned about, unlike those who raise the issue of invasion, taking more and more land, we are concerned about the people who live on those lands, whose ancestors lived there for centuries and centuries, were founding cities, were building factories, ports, developing agriculture. And these people are now called foreigners.
Well, what about the thousands of those people who live on those lands who've been killed by Russian bombs, Mr. Foreign Minister?
Look, I'm awfully sorry, but the primitivism of questions, you repeat the same and only question again and again. And I asked you, please, kindly send me the list of those churches, the list of those kindergartens, please. And I will send you the factual information about how Ukrainian army is fighting only civilians. I give you the example of the Kursk region. There is no military sites at all. There was also a terrorist attack on the passenger train, but you never reported this.
Mr. Foreign Minister, the reality is so much of this has been captured.
We want to say something here about what Lavrov is saying, that, you know, most of this Western press, they don't report something that is not favorable to them. They only report things that they feel will be favorable to them. So when Ukraine is attacking civilians, attacking trains, civilian trains, doing other things, they don't report that one. The only one they will report is the one that they say Russia have done. So they are doing across the world. How about all the killings in Biafra land, in Igbo land, in Africa? How many of them are being reported on a daily basis? How about the suffering of our people, of the Biafran people, of the Igbo people, of African people? How about all the killings going on? How many times have you had it on their news at home? Say you are in London, and how many times do they show people that are being killed in Igbo land or in Nigeria, or even Fulani terrorists, killings and kidnappings? How many of them are being shown on the televisions in London or Paris or New York or Washington? How many of them? Or in any city that you live in? So they only report those things that are favorable to them and not to you. That's why we are saying at Inkolomahadum that we should be seeing things and interpreting them as they concern us, not as it concerns other cultures, because that's what they are also doing. Let's continue to watch the interview.
On television, we have reporters on the ground. I will send you a list as well, but the bottom line is the world has watched with its own eyes as people in all of these regions that have been taken over by Russian troops have been killed. We have seen that with our own eyes. We've watched it with our own eyes. But let me ask you.
No, I remember many images saying that Ukrainian civilians are being attacked by Russians, and then these images would turn out to be taken in Iraq 10 or 20 years ago. So my question is, do you believe NBC, your policy, does it provide for acceptance, the extermination by law of a language in any country?
Mr. Foreign Minister, I want to just ask you, when you landed in Alaska, you were wearing a USSR sweatshirt. Were you sending a signal that Russia wants to reestablish the former Soviet Union?
No. We were born in the Soviet Union. President Putin repeatedly stated that those who are not sorry what happened to the Soviet Union, they don't have a heart. But those who want to restore the Soviet Union, they don't have any brains. This is absolutely correct statement. We have recognized all the former Soviet republics as independent states. We develop relations with them as fully independent states. But when countries like Ukraine begin to, physically and by law exterminating everything Russian, as if I don't know, in any country, English language would be prohibited, history would be prohibited, American history would be prohibited. And this is not the case. The Soviet Union, and if you don't remember your roots, if you don't have nostalgic, memories about your childhood, about your youth, about your first love, about your friends, then I don't think you really represent.
Let's interject here about what Lavrov is saying. That's if you don't remember your roots, if you don't know whom you are, if you don't know where you come from, then we at Incolum Madam is also adding that you have missed your way. Everybody must remember their roots. Know what is happening to your root, to your land, to your people. You cannot say because I am now in America, I am now in Europe, I am now in UAE, I am now in Australia. Whatever is happening in my land, I don't care. If you are doing like that, you have missed your way. Because we're supposed to be in our land. And the resources, natural resources in our land is trillions and trillions of dollars. And we are outside scavenging, many of us, forgetting our roots. Never you forget your roots. If you forget your roots, you have been misled by colonial manipulation, by colonial misinformation, miseducation, brainwashing, and misdirection. Let's continue to watch the interview. It's very, very important.
Humanity and the human values.
Mr. Foreign Minister.
To remember and to cherish what happened in your life for many years is not the same as to try to take over militarily each and every place. This is not true.
Does President Putin want peace?
Yes.
And what say you to U.S. lawmakers here who believe you are stringing along President Trump? Are you?
It is not for the lawmakers or for any media outlets to decide, what President Trump is motivated by. We respect President Trump because President Trump defends American national interests. And I have reason to believe that President Trump respects President Putin because he defends Russian national interests. And whatever they discuss between themselves is not a secret. We want peace in Ukraine. President Trump wants peace in Ukraine. The reaction to Anchorage meeting, the gathering in Washington of these European representatives, and what they were doing after Washington indicates that they don't want peace. They say we cannot allow defeat of Ukraine.
Let us interject here one more time to say about what Lavrov said, that Trump is trying to protect American interests. That is why you see him trying to make this, to strike this peace deal for this war to stop. And that also Putin is trying to protect the Russian interest. So let me go back to Putin, I mean to Trump. You see all this tariff war that Trump is levying on people, on nations, and all these things he's doing, all the peace plan and all that. That is because he's protecting American interests. Now, we take this back home to the Igbo race. If you're an Igbo man or a Biafran or an African, are you protecting it? What are your interests? And are you protecting that interest? What interest is more important than having a nation of ours? Having a continent like Africa, where we decide our boundaries by ourselves, by referendum, where we try to move away from the European creation to give us African identity, to give us Biafran identity, to give us Igbo man identity. That should be our interest, and not the interest of I don't care. Every nation, everybody try to protect their interests. How about you? Let's continue to watch the interview.
We cannot allow Russia to win. They speak in these terms: win, defeat, and so on and so forth. We proposed several times peaceful resolution on a diplomatic basis. And as I said, it was not us who blowed up the deal practically ready in April 2022. It was personally Boris Johnson, and it was personally several officials from the Biden administration, the French and the Germans. We know this.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We thank you for watching.
This is the end of the interview, and we just feel that it's very important that we use this interview by Lavrov as part of our lecture today, so that you can also have it on in your archive, because this interview is very, very, very good. Sergey Lavrov is a very experienced diplomat from Russia. He has been in that position since 2004, almost 21 years. And he explained everything, the root cause of all the conflicts in Ukraine and what they are doing and what led to the special military operation. And also how the people that live in the eastern part of Ukraine are Russian people, that they wanted freedom, that they needed referendum. And Ukraine didn't give them referendum. So Russia gave them referendum. They conducted referendum, and they decided they want to be independent. And self-determination, where you want to belong, is enshrined in the UN and African Charter. So it's not a crime. It's not a crime. It's just to save the Russian population, the Russian culture in the eastern part of Ukraine, that they killed for only 8 years. That is why we are having this Ukrainian conflict today. That is why. Because the NATO, led by America, wanted to use Ukraine as a launch pad to fight a war, to weaken and defeat Russia, and also balkanize the Russian resources and divide Russia into 3 countries. So that is very important, that we know the genesis of all these things, but because sometimes we don't have time, sometimes we don't have the resources to get information. That is why we don't have all the information that we need. And that is, again, another reason why we established in Colombo and Wisdom University, so can be bringing you certain information that you're supposed to know and explain it to you from Igbo man, Biafran, and African perspective. And with this, we shall bring in today's lecture to an end. But before we do, we have to advise every African, every Biafran, every Igbo man to protect your interests. Your interest is for you to be able to be having referendum anytime you want, because all the countries we have in Africa today are artificial boundaries created by foreigners. We have to have the right to say, this is where we want to belong based on our culture and way of life. It is very, very important. And with this, we shall be bringing today's lecture to an end. Thank you very much for joining me, and have a very, very good day. Thank you.